Hello, I'm Riley Olson.
I'm Evan Kaiser.
I'm Melissa Hyduke.
I'm Emma Berthold.
And we're going to be going over Coca-Cola in 2011, searching for a new model. Let's go over the agenda for today. We will start with the case history of Coca-Cola, then move to some problems we could develop out of the case. After that, we will go over our analysis of the external environment with the PESTEL analysis and the value chain analysis. Then we will explore the internal environment, which will include Porter's 5 forces, a SWOT analysis, and a Vrino analysis. Finally, we will go over some strategic moves Coca-Cola can take and what decision we recommend them taking. So Coca-Cola was first invented in 1886 by a pharmacist named John Pemberton. He would combine syrup with carbonated water and would sell it outside of his business. 5 years later, Asa Candler bought the formula with the goal being to sell and market this product in every state. Candler sold the rights to bottle the beverage to 2 lawyers in 1899, who were able to create a network of over 1,000 bottlers in a few years. Candler sold the company to a group of investors led by Ernest Woodruff in 1916. Woodruff would make the company public that same year. Ernest's son Robert would become president of the company after 4 years and is attributed with coining the phrases like the pause that refreshes and it's the real thing. Robert would have an influence in Roberto Guizzetta becoming CEO in 1981. Guizzetta led Coke from 1981 to 1997. His tenure was marked with intensive competition with Pepsi as well as several acquisitions. He would cut out non-soda essentials while also creating more products through the soda part of the business. One of those new beverages was Diet Coke in 1982. In 1983, it became the most popular soda. He would switch the company from using cane sugar to high fructose corn syrup to help save money. While he was CEO, he created the CCE, also known as the Coca-Cola Enterprises. The CEE was in charge of the massive bottling acquisition Guizzetta had performed. He bought 2 of Coke's biggest bottlers for $2.4 billion. This purchase would leave Coca-Cola with $1 billion in long-term debt. He would continue to purchase similar underperforming bottlers and sell them to the CCE. He would also invest $1.5 billion into developing Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Guizzetta would die from lung cancer in 1997 while he oversaw Coke. While he oversaw Coke, the market value had risen from $4 billion to $147 billion. After his death, the lost decade would begin. It wouldn't be until E. Neville Isdale took over in 2004 that Coke would begin to climb back to the top. Before Isdale, Coca-Cola CEOs and leadership would miss out on several deals. They would miss out on acquiring the companies in charge of Gatorade and Sobe, 2 up-and-coming beverages. Once Isdale took over, he gathered 150 senior managers from across the globe to create a 10-year strategic growth plan, which would emphasize a revival of the sparkling sodas. While CEO, Coke would see a 6% increase in global sales. Isdale would bring Muhtar Kent, a renowned negotiator and a manager who had left while Coke was struggling and who would take over in 2008. Kent would acquire the CCE in 2010, giving Coca-Cola the control of 90% of the North American bottling volume. Some problems we could develop out of the case were about long-term growth and the 2020 vision. With long-term growth, how can the Coca-Cola company use their business model to experience long-term growth in both the sparkling and still beverage industries? And with a vision for the future, how could Coca-Cola achieve their goal to double revenues by the year 2020? To better understand what's going on and how Coca-Cola might combat these problems, let's begin with the analysis of the external environment.
So the analysis of the external environment, the first thing we'll talk about is the PESTEL analysis. So under the political part of the PESTEL analysis, there are 3 things: taxes, government policies, and tariffs on imports. So first, let's talk about taxes. So taxes on raw materials such as sugar can be an issue for Coke. For example, taxes on sugar in the UK are much higher than taxes in South America. And Coke has one of their main distributors and producers in the UK. It's government policies. Many governments have began to ban certain amounts of ingredients and products to try and become a healthier lifestyle. For example, in the United States, the government has began to ban the amount of sugar in certain products. So Coke has to adapt to these government policies and try to formulate their products around these government policies. And with less sugar in introducing products such as Coke Zero and no sugar Coke, some of these Coke users that are used to the old Coke will not like the new versions and maybe wear or trend away from Coke products. Last are tariffs on and imports. So tariffs on imports must be followed, and the high ones mean that Coke is only spending more money than the way they would like to. Second, economic. Inflation and exchange rates are a part of the economics. So when inflation and exchange rates are low, Coke is more willing to probably invest into different countries that are in need, or probably open more plants that would provide jobs for countries that are in need. But when those rates are high, Coke is less likely to, because they'll have a higher cost of borrowing money to invest in these countries. Second is economic crisis. As we can all see in this time of quarantine and pandemic, and our economy being in a very, very large crisis, people are less likely to spend on non-necessity items. So people are less likely to spend on purchasing the luxury items such as these Coke and Coke products. Next is socioculture. So millennials and Gen X are a big socioculture demographic that Coke can target, because they make up over about 60% of the market share. So if Coke can target these demographics, then they'll have a large market share and will be successful in the market. A second social culture thing that Coke has done is the 5x20 program. And this program that Coke's implemented is targeted at women that need help overcoming social and economic barriers. This program so far has helped 3.2 million women become empowered through education and working their ranks up through Coke. This is also, their goal is to have 5 million women by the end of 2020. Last are fads and trends. As I mentioned earlier, a big trend is going healthy. So in order to take advantage of this trend, Coke has been making a variety of products that have 0 sugar and 0 calories. They also introduced fiber into these drinks, such as the Coca-Cola Plus, which is in that white bottle. I found that interesting because I don't know how well a fiber drink would be or taste. Another trend that is popular is energy drinks. And Coke has begun to make Coca-Cola Energy, which is also can be found in 0 calories and 0 sugars, but how healthy can an energy drink actually be? So next we'll talk about the technological. So a couple things on the technological. Social media advertising is an easy and cheap way to get new products into the world very quickly. Also tying into this, Coke is using data mining to target specific people or demographics that are clicking on their social media advertising in order to gain more knowledge of those people and try to target those people more heavily. Third is smart farming and water harvesting. So Coke uses water as their main ingredient in their products. So they are one of the largest consumers of water in their industry. So in order to provide more clean water or try to not waste as much water, they have used water harvesting. And this image at the bottom left is a basic image of how water harvesting works. So Coke will take rainwater, they'll distill it, then they'll be able to reuse it back into their ingredients and try to limit the amount of waste. And going along with that, smart farming. So Coke has been working with their farmers or their plant producers to become more effective and efficient with their product and production, and try to also reduce the amount of waste that they are producing. The fourth might be the most famous technological thing that Coke has had is their fountain machines. As many of you guys have used, this fountain machine is just a couple pushes or taps on a screen, and there's hundreds of options of different types of drinks that you can have. Now onto the environmental. So Coke has become more green, and they plan on having 100% of their bottles recyclable by 2025. They've also been using recycled materials to create their new bottles and packaging. An initiative that Coke has followed is World Without Waste. And this plan is for Coke to recycle or collect 1 bottle for every bottle that is sold. So they're trying to match the amount of bottles that are sold and try to recycle that. To put that into this perspective, a typical business day of Coke is selling 1.8 million bottles. So if they're able to match that 1.8 million every day, then that is a lot of help that they are doing for the environment. Last is water stewardship. As I mentioned, they are the largest user of water, one of the largest water users in the industry. And so this water stewardship program that they have done is they have taken the water that they use in their ingredient, they'll collect the runoff water, or the wasteful water, I should say, and then they'll recycle it, adjust the pH levels, and then they'll give it back to communities in need that so they can drink and use it for other things. Last is legal. So Coke is a global company, so they do have to follow employment laws on different scales in different countries. They have to follow the waste laws on different scales in different countries. They're very good at following these laws, especially the waste laws, because they are trying to become a greener, more environmental friendly company. But that was just in the recent. They also do follow, like any company does, they follow lawsuits. So as I mentioned, they are trying to become a greener company, but in previous years, there's a lawsuit going on right now, actually, out of California, saying somebody's suing Coke because they are a main contributor to the amount of plastic that is being found in the oceans in these trash islands, as you can see, and they have been misleading over the previous years how recyclable their products actually are. Now I'll toss off to Alyssa to talk about Porter's Five Forces.
So as Evan said, we're going to discuss the Porter's Five Forces, but an important note to add that we're going to do Porter's Five Forces for the soft industry as a whole. So to begin, we're going to begin with the threat of new entrants, and through research, we've determined that this threat is relatively low. First off, due to the economies of scale, with how large-scale companies such as Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, and Pepsi are, with the amount that they mass produce, in turn, then they get lower costs, whether that be labor costs, output costs. And then to begin with that, then we also have brand loyalty. And to put that in perspective, at the individual product category level, 90.5% of regular Coke drinkers are loyal to Coke, and then 88.9% of regular Pepsi drinkers are loyal to Pepsi. And then another factor is the distribution networks. Coca-Cola alone globally has 225 bottlers, and then the capital requirements are very high. So just to put this in perspective, there are concentrated manufacturing plants, and then they also have the bottler manufacturing plants. And just one concentrate manufacturing plant could cost about $50 to $100 million to build. And then along with that comes also the incumbency cost advantages of being in the market for so long. And then moving on to competitive rivalry, that we have marked as very high. So companies competing are relatively the same size. For example, the three main competitors in the soft drink industry are Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper Snapple. And with this comes a declining mature market. Now, right now, the soft drink industry is more in a mature market as these companies are coming out with product innovations to keep afloat. Now with this, the mature market is coming from the high competition, price wars, and the competitive advantage that comes through the economies of scale, which I had mentioned in the previous slide. And with that, rivals are committed to business and have leadership aspirations, and they are also emotionally attached to being a leader. So with this being said, in 2018, Coca-Cola spent $4.11 billion on advertising, and to follow that behind them is Pepsi, and they spent $1.49 billion on advertising. And this alone shows how committed they are to reaching their consumers, whether that be putting their other competitors down or trying to build up their brand image to then have that leadership role in the market. There are also high exit barriers. As I mentioned before, a lot of these companies are emotionally committed to being the leader. They've emotionally invested years upon years in this industry, as well as I mentioned before, all the costs that come with just like the concentrated plants alone or the bottler plants alone. And then there are a lack of differentiation in products. Now that does go along with that. Yes, consumers do agree that there are different tastes in the different brands, but to put this in perspective, Coke owns Mr. Pibb, and then Dr. Pepper Snapple obviously owns Dr. Pepper. So those are similar in taste. And then Coke owns Sprite, Pepsi owns Mountain Dew, and Dr. Dr. Pepper, Snapple owns Canada Dry. So as you see, a lot of these products are similar. And then to move into bargaining powers of suppliers, we have put that is also relatively low. Now, in the soft drink industry, we're looking at the suppliers as the concentrate producers, and the concentrate producers, they blend the common ingredients and flavors and then ship those mixtures to the bottlers. Now, what comes in those concentrate producers, some of that is caffeine, coloring, and citric acid. So those materials are very commodity-like, so those are widely available. So with that being said, there are a large amount of those raw material suppliers. And so then with that, on top of it being commodity-like, suppliers do not have many differentiated products. So if Coke wants to buy, Coke has a bunch of options to choose what sugar they want to buy from. Then if one is charging 50 cents and the other is charging 48 cents, since they are selling similar products, they can then choose the supplier that is selling it at 48 cents. With that, there's also a low threat of forward integration, as then the concentrators would have to take on the cost of the bottlers, which the bottlers are in charge of then packaging and putting all the products out on the shelves. And there are also low switching costs for the suppliers, as they can just choose from any supplier to any supplier. As I mentioned, these are commodity-like. So in the end, the suppliers do not have much bargaining power. So then moving on to the bargaining power of buyers, I broke the buyers up into two sections. The first one being bottlers. So as I mentioned, the bottlers buy the concentrate or the syrup from the concentrate producers, and then they add carbonated water and sweeteners, and then they package those drinks into bottles or cans, and then they put those on the shelves in stores. So why it's so low is because of one of the reasons is the long-term contracts with Coca-Cola. Years in past, the bottlers did have a little more control, as they were not in those contracts. So the bottlers could sell the size of the cans and the packaging that was selling best in that area for them, when in the grander aspect, Coke could have been making more money if they were producing other sizes. So now Coke and the bottlers have come together, and the bottlers' revenues not just based off of what size of the cans they produce. So with that being said, they don't have much wiggle room in that aspect of it. There are a large number of competitors. As I mentioned earlier, Coca-Cola alone has 225 bottlers globally, and the threat of backward integration is low. Bottlers are in charge of and incur the expense of changing equipment for new products. So then on top of all of those costs they're incurring, then they would have to open up new plants to then buy the concentrators out. And there are also higher switching costs, as the bottlers need this syrup to produce the Coke in the end. They don't really have many options if the concentrators are then raising the prices on them. And now going to the consumers, the threat of bargaining powers from consumers is also relatively low due to the amount of buyers there are in this industry. And then also, as I mentioned previously, they do offer undifferentiated products. Again, the taste not being important here, more that they offer, just as Coke offers Sprite and Pepsi offers Mountain Dew. And then buyers do also have alternatives, as they can bounce back between Pepsi, Coke, and Dr. Pepper. The one thing is, though, there is high brand loyalty. As I mentioned, 90% of Coke's buyers do stay loyal to Coke and will not change over to Pepsi or Dr. Pepper. And again, purchase is not a significant portion of the buyer's cost, as a buyer just spending $1 on a Coke will not make or break a buyer's bank. And then substitute products, that threat is very high now due to more health conscious consumers and the more health trend that is kicking off around the world today. So with that being said, there is a relatively attractive price performance trade-off for those substitute products. Many consumers are willing to pay an extra 50 cents, $1 for a more healthy drink that has more vitamins, more protein, less sugar in it, that is still then going to fulfill that same need. And then there are also low switching costs, as no one is really as brand loyal to some of these products as they would be to Coca-Cola or Pepsi. And all these products are close in how it fulfills the consumer's need, and in the end, consumer's need is just to fulfill their thirst. And then just to tie it up for you guys together one last time, the Porter's Five Forces was over the soft drink industry as a whole, and the threat of new entrants, bargaining powers of suppliers and bargaining power of buyers is all relatively low, but the competitive rivalry and substitute products is very high. So with that being said, the soft drink industry market is relatively attractive. The market is saturating, but there is still room to grow. And then with that being said, we're going to start looking at analysis of the internal environment, and I will first start that off with the beginning of the SWOT analysis. So first, we're going to look at the strengths of Coca-Cola in general, and first we're going to start off with the brand name. In 2018, Coke had the highest brand awareness, and it was said that 7.1 billion people would recognize Coke if shown their logo. And then also they were ranked 5 as most valuable brands globally. And then next is their secret formula. As we know, new Coke versus old Coke, when they introduced the new Coke, their sales plummeted as consumers did not like that taste as much as the old Coke. So then once they changed over to the original Coke, their sales then eventually skyrocketed in the correct direction. And then with that, another big strength for them is their availability consumers. As you can see in this chart, here's just an example of 39 prevalent restaurants Coke is served at. As you can see, Coke serves at a lot more restaurants than Pepsi does, and that is due to their distribution network and partnerships with restaurants. And then they alone to top off availability consumers, then that correlates with their distribution network. And as I've mentioned a couple times already, they have $225 for just Coca-Cola. And then their extended global reach is another impressive quality that they have. They offer products in 200 plus countries, they have 500 plus brands worldwide, and they also offer 800 plus drink varieties in the US alone. And then to just touch on a couple of the weaknesses that Coke does have is they don't own any food brands. And with the soft drink industry not as popular anymore, this then is a weakness for them, as their main competitor and rival Pepsi owns several snack companies, food companies such as Lay's, Doritos, and Quaker Oats. And with that, I will pass it off to Evan to complete the rest of the SWOT analysis.
So thank you, Alyssa. So going into opportunities and threats, coming from the Pastel analysis, many of the opportunities are seen, such as Gen X and millennials. If Coke can target these demographics, this will set them up for future success, because these demographics are younger in age and they're going to take up much of the market share. And second is social media advertising. Since we are headed into an e-commerce or e-market trend, social media obviously has been taking over, and being able to put ads out on social media will help Coca-Cola reach these up-and-coming Gen X and millennials. Third is if they can follow programs such as the 5x20 program and kind of implement more programs like that, they will gain more consumers through their through what they're trying to reach out into the communities, and kind of a better image in communities. Fourth is the smart farming. This is a big opportunity because this has been allowing them to cut costs and become more effective and efficient in their farming. And that is what the goal of every producer is, to cut costs and supply more. And fifth is the fads and trends. If Coke can follow fads and trends, even though it is a roller coaster, if they can follow these fads and trends, they will have the opportunity to make a lot of profit in a short little period of time. A couple of the threats from the Pastel analysis are the taxes and regulations. As I mentioned, these taxes and regulations do come from all over the globe, so they do have to apply to the Coke industries all over the globe, so they do have to work with certain government regulations. And then the second is economic crisis. As you can see, as I mentioned earlier, we are in one right now, and people are less likely to spend money on the luxury items such as a Coke or a Sprite. People are trying to keep their pennies in their pocket as long and as much as they can. Next, we'll talk about the value chain. So the primary activities of value chain include inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing, sales, and services. Going over the inbound logistics, Coke treats suppliers as business partners, and each supplier must follow a set of rules and regulations that Coke has given to them. As I mentioned earlier, Coke is trying to go environmentally more friendly, and these regulations are to help the farmers become more environmental friendly, and they're also to help them become more smart farming. Second is operations. Coke is a global company that operates on a local scale. As I mentioned, they are found all over the world, but in the US, as you can see, they're on a local scale because each state or each city or each town has a Coke distributor, or you can find a Coke almost everywhere in the world. Outbound logistics includes their bottling partners, their distributors, and then their vendors and consumers. It's pretty straightforward and very basic. Marketing sales, they're a globally recognized brand, and they're famous for their logo. As you can see right here on the right, people around the world recognize this logo, and they know that it is a Coca-Cola product. Last is the services. They do offer a service after purchase. It is called My Coke Rewards, and how people get involved with this is they can scan their Coca-Cola bottle on an app on their phone and rank up points and rewards for future prizes and products such as like 50% off or coupons or a free Coke or this and that. Next are the secondary activities, which include technology, HR management, procurement, and firm infrastructure. So technology, Coke has 6 research and development facilities around the world, and these research and development facilities are responsible for creating the programs such as their water harvesting, which is a huge program that they are implementing to help communities around the world. Their HR management, Coke does pay above average salary, and they provide good compensation, and they allow their workers to work for rewards or bonuses. They also focus on employee motivation, so you're not really sitting there at a desk just kind of crunching numbers or sitting there at a desk listening to a conference call. They encourage employees to go out and communicate with other employees and interact with others. The procurement is very similar to the inbound logistics in the sense that there's guidelines for thousands of farmers and suppliers, but they also try to maintain a very strong relationship with these farmers. Last is the firm infrastructure. There's a large infrastructure and educates suppliers through research and development. Next, Alyssa will talk to you about the Vrino.
So here, as I mentioned, we're going to touch on Vrino, and we put 3 main things that Coca-Cola does for Vrino. We put availability of products, brand image, and formula. As you can see, these 3 things check all categories under Vrino except one. And first, we're going to start with the availability of products. This is a very valuable source as it enables Coke to serve the global market and maintain a very strong global presence. It is rare as in how effective they are with the availability of products, how many places they are. As I mentioned, they are prominent in 39 restaurants. And those were just a list of some of them. And then it is imitable as Pepsi also has a global network of its distributors, though it is non-substitutable. It is non-substitutable because Pepsi does not quite have the reach Coca-Cola does globally. And then as it is organized for profit, it does help their outcome it does allow them to have a better outcome in revenue through their distribution networks. Next, we'll touch on brand image. Brand image truly drives the value of Coca-Cola, and it is important for managing their impressive and consistent market presence. It is hard to imitate being the 5th most valuable company in the world. And then as well as that also ties into how rare that is and how consistently they've been able to do that over the years. And it is also non-substitutable. And another thing to touch on how non-substitutable it is Coke targets and reaches a wide range of demographics throughout the whole world. As Pepsi, as you see, they do target more the younger generation in more of their advertisements. And it helps the organize for profit as it comes from the recognizability of the brand Coca-Cola and the sales that they then receive in return for that. And then lastly, we're going to touch on the formula for Coke. It is extremely valuable as when I mentioned earlier the new Coke versus the old Coke, once they unveiled the new Coke, consumers strongly disliked it, kind of, I guess, boycotted purchasing Coke products. And then once Coke brought out their original Coke, then their, as I mentioned earlier, their sales took off. And then as it is rare and inimitable because only few people in the world do know this formula, and it, as well as it being non-substitutable, as I mentioned, only few people in the world do know this formula and how distinguishable it is from Pepsi, people who are brand loyal to Pepsi and brand loyal to Coke. And is the organized for profit truly comes from word of mouth, how for people who are loyal to
Okay, so now I'm going to speak about the strategic alternatives. They are what we see as best fit as Coca-Cola moving forward as a company. The first alternative is organizational growth, meaning partnering with existing companies like Red Bull and Dr. Pepper, because this will allow Coke to capitalize on the growing consumer trends. Partnerships like these are important to any company's growth because it builds synergy and helps Coke's core competencies rise above competitors. These partnerships will help the opportunity of appealing to fads and trends of consumers and alleviate the threat of competitors acting first. The second alternative is portfolio diversification, where Coca-Cola needs to introduce new products into the still beverage market. Since Coca-Cola consists of approximately 14 products, that generates over $1 billion in revenue, but their market share is not increasing at the same rapid rate. So therefore, by introducing new products like carbonated water or ready-to-drink coffee beverages, Coke would continue to uphold the brand's name while satisfying the changing needs of millennials and Gen X consumers. The last alternative is to educate the consumer more. This will be done by reducing the sugar amounts in their carbonated beverage options. The World Health Organization came out with a study of information about how people should limit their intake of added sugar to their diet with no more than 10% of their total daily calorie intake. Also, with reducing the amount of sugar, Coke will potentially help strengthen the consumer's perception of the soft drink industry, leading to a stronger brand name. So the problems talked about earlier by Riley will be fixed by the best alternative, which we believe is alternative one. So our recommendation is to partner with the previously mentioned companies, Red Bull and or Dr. Pepper or Snapple. This will allow Coke to extend the franchise business model and into an established consumer base. Also, now that we are in 2020, I'd like to address whether Coke had met their doubling the revenue for the vision that they had. Coca-Cola has seen a varying in their revenue over the past 5 to 8 years because they are solely a beverage company. They took a dip in 2016 from their decision to refranchise the company, but by 2018 they regained their revenue by 22% growth, which is a good indicator that they will meet those 2020 vision opportunities. So by implementing a new merger and acquisition model, Coca-Cola should look forward to the long-term growth of the company that they will endure. Overall, this will benefit Coke and the soft drink industry because they will force competitors to follow suit and match their level of advancement within the company. Any questions can be posted to Blackboard. Thanks for watching.